Hello, Political Inquirer. There's something I noticed. Something that makes particularly the right be utterly useless. So allow me a few minutes to discuss how to be useless politically. For those of you who are waiting for part 2 of the 80s videos, I will continue episode 1 in one of the future weeks. What prompted me to make this placeholder video though, is having seen that, once again, James Lindsay continues what he's always done. Something I already criticized him, but I do not expect him to have seen it, especially given that it was a side note in a much bigger video. The video I'm speaking about is his video on the woke right. Many people have adopted this point that there is a woke right, particularly liberals, and to be frank, it's utterly pointless. It is done to make a new category to put the right in, something which, for the purpose of this video, I will call Labellist Politics. It's the idea that if you just describe politics more, you are being productive, that it helps you achieve anything. It doesn't. At the beginning of Lessons to Political Maturity 1, I bring this up. Ironically though, given the release of this video, it's the previous video in that episode. In it I highlight, or rather, I bring up how the Distributist explains two things. The first is that in politics, many online viewers have the impression that by simply writing a manifesto, they become closer to achieving their goals. Even people like Christopher Rufo, who do talk about theoretic political knowledge, are deeply embedded in other forms of activism like fundraising, talking with representatives behind the scenes, pushing committees for certain policies as involved members. In other words, more than mere voters. Go watch that video for a more in-depth view of this topic. The second thing he brings up, which is relevant here, is that even if you do write a manifesto, by the time you're done writing it, the event for which it was relevant likely has passed, and you spent a lot of effort into researching and writing something that gives you little advantage beyond popularity with an audience which likes this type of ideas. It's similar to how the NRX had previously the cathedral, which Yarvin took from earlier thinkers and just advocated it to dissidents. What happened around maybe 1 or 2 years ago with the academic agent as well. So, instead of the model of the cathedral, he came up with his own model of the octopus, which, by the amount I've heard of it since, seems to have been little more than a fad to spin his own level of understanding on the issue. It served no political purpose, just grabbed people's attention for a while. But I'm here to speak about James Lindsay, because why not? The guy has been in a bunch of controversies lately, a little more on that later though. What caught my attention was his video on the woke right. This is an idea he and a lot of other people are fond of, but it doesn't really do much. It's just a way of categorizing politics in more minute boxes. Especially baggage for the mind, in the case of James, mainly to gatekeep anti-wokeism to liberals. So, now we can talk about the right as woke too. I'll make some commentary on that video in a bit, but the video I found much better to address this problem of over-describing and labelism is this. Do your homework. By New Discourses.
They're going to catch you, though, at the end of your presentation, at the end of your talk, while you're out at a public rally or a march, when you show up to go to a Trump event and you're outside and CNN is going to be standing there and they're going to interview you and they're going to ask you a question like, can you define woke? Or, well, you say that we're not a democracy in the United States, we're a republic. What's the difference? Those are two very specific questions that I've run into recently that people got caught flat-footed with, right? What does woke mean? Go ahead, just define it for us. And the thing is a lot of people can't do it. They can't simply say, woke means having a critical consciousness. Critical consciousness means believing that our social environment is contoured by illegitimate power structures that need to be identified, exposed, and denounced. That's what woke means. That's what you've woke up to. When you wake up, you have critical consciousness.
This is self-parody. You're acting as if describing them will give you an advantage over them. And you know what's even more ironic? You're trying to say that what we lack is a more accurate description of the left, that if only we could express better what they do, then we'll stand unopposed because we expose them. You know that's not what's happening, and you know it in your own video.
You have to learn a little bit of their language, but at the very bottom, you've got to be able to answer some really basic questions that you can predict are going to be thrown at you. The left operates in very large part by trying to discredit its opponents, to make them look as though they aren't qualified, that they're somehow not worthy of being taken seriously or listened to. And in the past, I've outlined 3 ways that they do that in primary. They try to discredit people's intellectual status. They try, which is, I say, to undermine their intellectual authority, meaning you're somebody who's too dumb to be listened to. You don't even know what you're talking about. They also try to undermine people's moral authority. You're too bad of a person. You're a racist or a transphobe or something icky and awful. Conspiracy theorist or something. Actually, conspiracy theorist is not in this category. It's in the next one. You're too bad of a person to take seriously. You're just some kind of a deplorable. And third, they try to undermine your psychological authority. They try to paint you as crazy, a conspiracy theorist, or a lunatic, or unhinged. We could go through the laundry list of words that I got called. I'm off the rails. I don't know how long I've been off the rails. I don't remember coming off the rails. I think I actually looked down and saw the rails for the first time and realized what was going on, but that makes you look awfully crazy to people who are unwilling to admit what's there. But that's not my point. My point is that the left proceeds in many, many, many cases through a relentless activism, a subversive activism of undermining your psychological, moral, and intellectual authority so that you are not credible.
I shouldn't be the one telling you this. I'm not trying to demoralize you.
What you'll see these people do is say, well, I think that James Lindsay is really kind of off his rocker, but when he says this thing, at least he's okay, or something to that effect. Or I don't want to defend James since he lost his mind, but blah, blah, blah. It's extremely valuable if they can get you to doubt yourself. Maybe I don't really know this that well. Maybe I should quit. Maybe I did do a transphobia. Maybe I'm hurting people. Maybe I'm a bad person. Maybe I should quit. Maybe I am getting kind of wrapped up in tinfoil hat territory and believing crazy things, and I should reel it in and I should quit. See how it works? If they can get you to doubt yourself, you will censor yourself and may even take yourself out of the fight. If they can get your friends to see you as inferior in terms of your intellect, your moral standing, or your psychology, then they can get those people to turn on you and socially pressure you. And if they can get the masses, so to speak, out there to believe any of those things about you.
I'm trying to make you be a little more productive. Don't get me wrong though. You have to be stopped, but not for those reasons. Even this past month, James showed several times how he is spiraling out of control. He went on rants about St. Michael because Trump called to him in a post, though I couldn't find again any good images of James's rants on this. My favorite rant this month though was this. I will give the summary of Harry from the Lotus Cities on this, because he puts it perfectly. A CCP conspiracy? During election season? Ain't it turning MAGA Catholic? Led by Auron MacIntyre? Localized entirely in the conservative media? Yes. May I see it? No. Absolutely classic. Also this.
Now, what kicked all of this off? Simple. Auron MacIntyre, a man I suspect James Lindsay would never face off with in a million years because Auron would wipe the floor with him. And yes, I'm aware my bias is projecting harder than a military parade on the 4th of July, but don't worry, I always do bring my receipts. So Auron MacIntyre said this: DEI isn't some crazy form of communism, though its proponents are often neo-Marxists. DEI is the natural evolution of civil rights law. That's why it was able to take hold so easily, and until you are willing to unwind that leviathan, this is the world you will live in. Needless to say, Sargon agreeing with this, even extending, saying communism isn't separate from liberalism though, James did not take too well to that, even going so far as to pluck Sargon, with Carl saying the following: I consider this an open admission that James can't substantiate his argument. I have never once insulted James. In fact, I have defended him many times. In our discussion, I pointed out that many people are often emotionally attached to liberalism in an unhealthy way. Seems relevant. Though personally, I find Harry Robinson from the low diseater summation of the scuffle the best one, both amusing and succinct. Carl respectfully disagrees with James Lindsay. James, and I took that personally. What a clown you are. Liberals always side with communists when push comes to shove. This was motivated by Auron MacIntyre pointing out correctly that DEI is an extension of the Civil Rights Act, and Lindsay starts throwing pissy fits over his sacred cow being criticized. Fundamentally unserious. Men like Lindsay have no solutions to our problems. He is a snake oil salesman who wants to sell you a complicated, fancy explanation of wokeness as French post-constructional fetish theory while ignoring the legal and social framework that powers woke. Ignore.
But anyway, that is what the brain obsessed with describing more, and describing better does to you. And I wouldn't wish that upon anyone in these circles. James acts like if we just knew more about the theory, we could maneuver around the left, when in reality, the left, doesn't care about it and sometimes even bases its behaviors not in theory, but what is most convenient to condemn the right. Let's look a bit on James's channel to show you this describe more labelist tendency. So let's see, we have the basics of cultural Marxism. Okay, what is the woke right? Theoretical communism, which is a perfect example of this kind of idea which I expressed earlier. Describing the manipulative tactics of the left, again, something which he should know about. Don't trust the woke language, okay? More describing things which other people do. Woke isn't insane, it's evil, okay? More philosophers and theory past, okay. Practical examples of manipulative tactics on the left, more in DI speaking bitterness. The political definition of queer, again, more theory describing what other people do. Do your homework, which is the video we just seen a little bit from. And more just describing, just labeling and describing, labeling this and describing over and over again. Very, very little to actually be useful, to actually be good politics. Okay, earlier just now you might have noticed me that I trailed off a little bit. This is because I noticed one of his videos which might have been different from the trend which I described. The one about how to allocate your resources. So I watched it, and I kid you not, it's 15.5 minutes, out of which the first 13 are just describing the Pareto principle over and over again. The fact that 80% of the most results that you get, the most productive that you are, is out of 20% of your work. And he also concatenated it, so he said that even at higher levels, 80% of those 20% is operating by the same rule and so on. Then he gave at minute 13 an example of him arguing on social media and how that's not really productive. Then he spent 20 seconds talking about some generic organizing thing that the company could do, and then he went back to describing the Pareto principle again to summarize his point. This is self-parody. The video where I was laughing at the fact that this is how James acts like is 11 months old at this point. And that's everything he's done for the past year since. What is woke? Whatever new manipulative thing the left decides it supports so that it wins and gets to shame you for not supporting it. That is what woke is. Woke is not a stagnant or consistent concept. It's an opportunistic one, and it should be recognized as such in the easiest to deliver way possible. The less you need to study it, to identify it, to understand, react, gain immunity to it, to what woke is, the better. In other words, the opposite of what James wants. Meanwhile, it's a bit absurd to claim that a woke right exists as an equivalent to a woke left. What does the woke left do versus the woke right do as woke? Well, the woke right wants to remind you, to make you aware that powerful people have some things in common with each other and they want to reduce your standard of living, and are part of organizations which actively take steps for that.
You know nothing and be happy.
Meanwhile, the woke left, right, how could I forget? They infiltrate any media they have access to. Last year, there was the meme in media progressive circles of what else? They get their ideas in legislation to the point where people become famous on the right for opposing the victories of the left after they happened, like Peterson and those at trigonometry. Something more. They aim and succeed in taking away people's livelihoods. Seriously, if you pay attention to the news relevant to this, every month you can go several times. Honey, another weekly news story of someone being penalized for disagreeing with the color flag people. It doesn't matter what it is this time. Disciplinary action, pay cut, being outright fired. You're just not allowed to disagree with them, so everybody must love them. I'm sure that will have zero negative consequences whatsoever. Is that all? Oh, far from it. They even promote the notion that wives lying to their husbands is virtuous if they get to keep the option to off their children before they're born.
Your turn, honey.
In the one place in America where women still have a right to choose. You can vote any way you want. And no one will ever know.
Did you make the right choice?
Sure did, honey.
Remember, what happens in the booth stays in the booth. Vote Harris Walls. Vote Common Good is responsible for the contents of this ad.
I mean, after all, what's a functioning civilization and high-trust society when you have your own ego and hedonism? Nothing, am I right? Hell, not even conservative parody can match progressive, unironic advocacy for evil. Leftists will see literal child sacrifice and go,
"Oh, he just like me! He just like me, for real!"
And speaking of voting, it's not like leftists don't use any conceivable opportunity to cheat in their own favor. Take, for example, that the maps of which states require no or lacks voter ID and more left-wing ones is over a 90% match. I wonder what purpose could that serve? And the rules they want to impose on others will never apply to them. Like, first demonizing support for Trump, and then blaming the attempts against him and his supporters on them.
You say it's misinformation, for instance. Is it misinformation when you say that a firefighter who got murdered at a rally, when you laugh at that and you say that that's totally fine, are you spreading misinformation?
I don't know if I said that's totally fine. I think I said I don't really have any sympathy for
No, you didn't. You
rally.
laughed about it. You thought it was funny. You didn't give a shit. You were under fire on Twitter for it for weeks until you finally backed away.
You can go I haven't backed away from any of those statements.
Yeah.
You can go find the
You haven't backed away from any of them?
No, not at all.
You don't care that the guy died, right?
People died. Rallies
Yeah, you don't care.
But when they push a message that they'd shut you down for, you can bet that what they say will never be taken down for hate speech. Even when they say things like,
Europe deserves to be flooded by immigrants.
And when they push for their vision of what will happen if they ever lose, it's apocalyptic to the point of hilarity. If you don't want to see for yourself, you can skip 2.5 minutes right now.
We weren't always like this. We had a beautiful life. The best parties. The most beautiful friends. We thought it was just another election. So a lot of us didn't vote. Why bother? Everyone knew the system was rigged. Many of us even voted for them. I know it sounds crazy now, but we didn't like Democrats back then. We were angry about the vaccine mandates and how they handled the war in Gaza. and the way they wanted to censor free speech on the internet.
They want unquestioned obedience.
So what did we end up doing? We voted for the guys who openly said they wanted to imprison dissenters and use the military against their political opponents. So yeah, we were wrong on that. Big time. When Trump got sick and died, Vance was 39 years old when he became president. 30 years later, he's still president today. And with the Supreme Court on his side, they gave him dictatorial powers. They took away women's reproductive rights, outlawed contraception, and removed the minimum wage. Then we had repression of dissent, AI surveillance of everything we did or said on a level we couldn't imagine. The government under Vance, Peter Thiel, and Elon Musk set up concentration camps for illegal immigrants, then legal immigrants, then even homeless people. They finally admitted climate change was real, but it was too late. Florida sank into the Gulf and the West burned, and cities across the country became uninsurable, then uninhabitable. Musk and Thiel poured all of our resources into artificial intelligence so they and their friends could become immortal. I don't know what happened to them, but I know what happened to us.
Are we all back? Okay. I'm done with focusing on how the left acts. Let's get back to the right. One of the biggest obstacles in the way of the right is trying to convince right-wingers that they should want to win. The left certainly has no issue with this. But the right needs to be reminded, as Auron MacIntyre said, the side that wants to win will always beat the side which just wants to be left alone. Since we are talking about controversies and conspiracies and the right not wanting to have any victories, recently the Catholic Church made a mascot, an anime girl named Luce, Italian for light. Now, I agree with the Distributist on the fact that if it wanted to reach out to the youth and onboard the popular trend, this was 10 years too late. But the reactions to it online? A disaster. Half the people I follow think it's cute and share art of her, while the other acts like this is the fall of the church. And as such, for the remainder of this episode, whenever possible, I will be posting fine art I found of Luce. Some of it is AI, but what can you do at this point? It's not like I commissioned any of it. Anyway, Luce, Luce, Luce. The fact that the right of all philosophies has any problems winning or holding on to the culture is absurd. You get a strong right, and you have civilization. You get a strong left, and you have the fall of civilization. Do not concern yourself with what they want and how you need to fit in their frame. They don't have a mandate for a frame. They exist to be corrected and abandon their ideas which only work in fantasy, faced with no opposition. What they'll need to turn into to avoid this is by adapting our values. Values forged to strength, diligence, fortitude, and good judgment. They thrive by complaining and consuming, decadently. We thrive by going beyond what they could in all aspects. Do not become an arbiter for the goals of the left. Become what the left is supposed to center itself around. They can only maintain their fantasies for as long as they've not ran out of the initial funds they stole or extorted from others. The fact they even attempt to bribe the population by promising it things to have easy access to doesn't matter, because in practical terms, what they're doing is making you more dependent on the system. There is no intellectual progress, and even there is no moral progress on the left, because as soon as you condemn anything they do, for them you're invalid because you condemn them. I'd like to end on a positive note. At the beginning of the video, I posted excerpts from the Academic Agent's blog post on elite organization. I might have been a bit unfair to it because there is something I found useful. There is a chart about who becomes more popular on the right and who is demoted by the regime. Now, this chart I realized when I first saw it from another source that is missing something. It's missing what would actually make the right stronger, what actually poses a danger to the social political order in which the right is on the back foot for the past 200 years. Things which we aren't focusing on, but should. I made my own answers for this, and I'll be presenting them in Chapter 4 of Lessons in Political Maturity 1, and to some extent in Which Way Modern Man. If you do feel this great urge to describe, spend your time at least describing something productive like this. Don't analyze something which is about to pass you by. Work toward the greater goal. Learn how to do better art than the slop coming out of Kyle Arts but right-wing circles. Collaborate with someone, online or in real life, because knowing more theory will just make you a very erudite loser. And that's not what I want for you. I forgot. This wasn't an episode of Lessons to Political Maturity by how much I spoke of politics. What was my outro for creating understanding? Yes. I see you. Have a nice week.